This video is a recording of a live event, about an hour and 15-minute webinar, and it's really packed with all sorts of energy healings and information and explorations into the fine abstract layers of creation. I hope you love it. If you do, please like and subscribe. I would like to share with everyone, especially the new people, what is energy healing in a nutshell. And then we'll take about 3 minutes of silence together because the silence is so important. It's such an important part of the whole energy healing process. It's one of the keys, right? Today's session is about the keys to energy healing. So may as well start out experientially. That's always good. And then prayer of gratitude, a brief recap of yesterday, and then diving into today's session. Energy healing. I'm almost doing the prayer. Energy healing is using consciousness to heal the body and basing that on the premise or the principle, we can say the principle, that the body and everything else in creation is made of consciousness. Consciousness is all there is. There's the source of creation. And I always, now you guys have inspired me, I always keep the ocean scenery in the background here because the ocean represents that unbounded infinite field of pure being, which is the source of everything. And then the sky area is representing the manifest level of creation. And then there's this wonderful gap right here. And this photograph is especially good because it kind of gives you some details in this gap here, this gappy area between the unmanifest ocean of source of creation and the manifest field. And in the gap is where energy healing takes place. Awareness or human consciousness has this wonderful ability, a little bit from yesterday, this amazing capacity of the human nervous system to fathom the entire range of the manifest field of creation all the way down to the finest, and then actually go in and experience the source of creation. So the whole thing is available and accessible to us as humans. It's really quite wonderful. It's a spectacular system that we have. Our human physical systems, our nervous systems have this flexibility and strength to be able to do this thing, which is to allow us to have the experience of the entire range of creation. Good stuff. So energy healing is leveraging that ability in the human nervous system. And it just, as I'm saying it to you, I feel as if whatever healings we can do today to fortify and expand on that capacity of the human nervous system, the better, probably. Because my intention, as I mentioned yesterday, for today's session or for this weekend session is I really would love to more and more and more empower everyone, all of you who are here, we're all here together for this process, to become so self-sufficient and so capable, so masterful of the energy healing process. And I really do feel that it is human birthright to be like that, that it's very likely that for centuries, human beings were living more like living very close to nature and so forth, that it was just common that human beings were living like in accord with natural law in such a way collectively that we tended to not make as many mistakes. And heavens, we hope, knock on wood. I'm looking around me in this new apartment. There's like no wood. Okay, knocking on wood there. That it is our destiny at this time that we've come a little bit away in our plastic apartments and all that we've come a little bit away from living in tune with natural law, and that it's time to come back into greater attunement and greater awareness of cosmic intention for our lives, for ourselves, for our bodies, our dear precious bodies, our precious nervous systems. Yeah. So anyway, that includes both the what is energy healing in a nutshell, as well as some intentions for today's session. Thanks for bearing with me through that. As promised, we would have 3 minutes of silence because, as per the map back here, my little two-dimensional flat virtual map, The source of creation is a field of infinite silence, unmanifest, quality-less, eternal. And it's really good to sort of tune into that, to be able to tune into that. And for us to do that as a collective in today's session is especially powerful. When we do it together, it enhances and supports the experience for everyone, which is why I like to do it. So let's take about 3 minutes of silence. I'll ask you to close the eyes. I'm already halfway there. And then after 3 minutes, I'll ask you to open the eyes and take about a minute to gently come out of the silence slowly. The more gently we come out, the more of that silence we bring with us into our conscious experience. That's always good. So being gentle with yourself always. All right, let's close our eyes. Look at the time. I just discovered I can make the time go like this. Okay, let's close our eyes. All right, let's slowly open the eyes. Welcome everyone to this webinar on keys to effective energy healing. It was absolutely my intention in this session to lay out those keys that are not only essential for you to be able to own the energy healing process yourself, but also really accessible. Because, oh, thank you, the prayer of gratitude, I almost forgot. Okay, we'll do the prayer, then we'll do that. Thank you to the source of creation for everything. for my precious support team. Thank you for everything. Thank you for every person in this energy healing session, in this webinar, those who are watching live right now, those who will watch later by the recording, those who will watch virtually on YouTube, even later on, everyone and the universe around each one of us. Thank you to the eternal tradition of wisdom that connects, that bridges the unmanifest ocean of pure source being with the entire manifest field of creation, that is that integration of the parts with the whole. Thank you for our hour together. May we work efficiently and profoundly. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be with each one of you at this time. These webinars are such a great, precious time for me. I appreciate it so deeply. So thank you to everyone who sent in questions and who contributed in various ways to today's session. It's really a delight to be here with you. All right, let's get going. Little recap of yesterday. The two main keys that I covered yesterday rather extensively. The first one was the hero's journey. And you, of course, those of you who've been with me for a while, you've heard me talk about the hero's journey before. We've gone in detail and so forth. But the idea here is to bring this information out in a way that's new and applicable in ways that we hadn't looked at before. So yesterday we were looking at the hero's journey in the context of diagnosis and how useful it is, because the hero's journey is already a set pattern that we see in creation. Oh, and now I get to show you the image. And this image, I believe I can do this technology here. This image was shared with me by a lovely woman in England. I believe she's here today. Oh, there it is. Can you see it? I can't even see myself right now. Let's see. Can you see it? Oh, yeah. That looks almost right. How come that one screen is in front of the other screen? It doesn't look like that at my end. Anyway, oh, there we go. Okay, perfect. All right. So yeah, this image, this amazing image, the lower part of the image is a seismographic measure of I believe it's an earthquake that occurred at the time of a great tsunami in Japan. And I can send details of like the name of the tsunami and the year and all that. But you know me, I'm just looking at the energy of it. So it's not quite as, oh, here, you guys can see me too if you want. Here, there I am. Okay. Yeah. So I'm more interested in the energy of this image than I am in the details of the year and so forth. And then the upper part of the image is an artist's rendition of the seismographic form. And you can see how when he made it three-dimensional, which of course the original was three-dimensional, no doubt. Oh, what a magnificent shape it is. What a magnificent shape. This shape, you guys, it is the same shape. It's the same, it's like the point from yesterday's webinar was that the whole universe functions as a kind of fractal and pattern. And so every part of the universe reflects every other part of the universe. Every system, every organ, every function in the human body has this ability to show this particular shape. It's so interesting to me. If you look how if we think of it starting at the end that's farthest away from my image on your screen, and it builds kind of slowly, and it builds to like this great sort of climax, and then it comes back down again. And you know, this is the way the hero's journey works. It's got all these different phases in it. And yesterday we looked at that phase that was associated or connected with the duodenum, where we're looking at the digestive system in terms of this shape and form. Oh, it's just the most exquisite thing I've ever seen. I'm so grateful, and all glory and gratitude to the lovely, beautiful woman who shared this image with me. So we'll share this image with all of you when we send out the links. I'll include a picture and maybe a little more detail about the name of the artist and all that, because it is interesting. But I thought you'd like to see it because that just delicious. Yeah, because this is there's a kind of set pattern. There's a set pattern that the one takes when it does its expression into the field of creation and then integrates and becomes part of that process, that evolution that the one wholeness of creation is experiencing all the time through every part and every piece of the universe, including us. Anyway, so knowing this pattern, we can see what it looks like laid out as a sort of visual image. We can understand it through the different functions of the physiology, but it's a pattern and it's a universal pattern that doesn't really, it has individual variations from place to place and part to part, but it doesn't really ever stop being the pattern that it is. So because of that, we can use it as a diagnostic tool, that we can look at any system or any organ or any part of the body, and we can superimpose it upon this concept of the hero's journey and this sort of natural pattern of the evolution of creation, and then see like which part of our system isn't lining up with that, or which part of where the discordant feelings in our own system are imposing themselves on that image and thus corrupting it to some degree or another. So the second part of the session yesterday was going into a little more detail about the role of the heart energy center, which again is so accessible to all of us, and how this healing function. So we looked at diagnosis, and then we looked at, okay, once we figured out what's wrong, then how do we sort of begin to catalyze the healing process? And the healing process is catalyzed through a wave of sweetness or love, devotion. It is. The imbalance is characterized by discordant feelings. And so what happens is, as long as the discordant feelings are stronger or more dominating than the capacity of the heart to produce this wave of compassion, then it's going to be quite difficult to get in to the seed of the illness and affect a change and to transmute the energy so that the health comes forward. But as soon as the heart center is able to, there's some witnessing element there of the discordant feelings. So the heart center is able to step back and go, oh, this discordant feeling is just a crust around the actual structure that I'm here to affect. Then it's a little easier usually at that point to just bring up the appropriate amount of compassion and mercy and love and forgiveness, or whatever is a specific flavor of love that's needed in that particular situation, to best bust through that crust of discordant feelings and get into the threads that are on the inside of that karmic knot. Threads of awareness or consciousness. So we talked about those two. But I know most of you are pretty much familiar with all that stuff. But it's good to look at it from various angles, which is really what we were doing yesterday. And I did promise that today we would start out with some questions. I've got my question and answer box open, and I'm getting some very sweet responses to the presence of a new little girl in my world, a very important little girl in my world. Yeah, she's so tiny. Yeah. So one lady's saying regarding the image that if the top section were more like a mirror image to the bottom section, that seems like it would fit better. And it does seem like it, but the interesting thing is that in this process, if we think of like how the hero's journey works too, we can look at it in those terms as well. The hero thinks to himself, oh, tomorrow I'll become the king, and I'm going to marry the princess, and all will be well with my kingdom. And then finds himself instead tomorrow cast out onto his journey. And what happens is the journey tends to be this sort of slow unwinding or unfurling of all the bits and pieces of self that are non-essential, and getting down to the very deepest essence of who we truly really are, which is we are the manifestation of this process of totality, creating the multiplicity, and then entering into the, like swirling into that multiplicity, um, integrating with it. I was going to say inculcating the wholeness into the parts like that. But once that's done, then the solutions tend to come rather quickly. And that's a lot of the way the healing process works. I'm kind of sorry. I was going to try to figure out, I didn't have enough time to make that image so that it would be back here and I could point to different parts of it. Maybe I'll do that for next time, because there's a lot of unpacking. That image has a lot in it, right? That could be unpacked. But maybe I'll flip it up on the screen one more time just so y'all can enjoy looking at it there. Yeah, so once the hero has stripped himself back to his most essential self, then the actual steps of moving forward and to resolving the challenges that he faces in his hero's journey, or in this case of healing the body, to actually bring in the energies required to heal the body, then the actual physical transformation can go fairly quickly. And I think that's why one side of it is slower and more elaborated and more developed. And then once the peak is reached, once the resolution point is hit, then it's usually, it's a fairly quick and efficient process. And we want that. We don't want it to be a long, slow, arduous, painful journey to heal too. It's ideally in its perfect form, we could say, the healing happens, the actual transformation or transmutation of the flesh is rather quick and beautiful and graceful and subtle. So those portions, the golden ratio, so that the big portion is exactly in relation to the smaller portion at the top in a way that produces the most aesthetically pleasing form. It's beautiful. But for some reason, and when the intellect is very, very strong and the mind is very, very clear, there's a deep appreciation of every nuance of the mechanics of this process by which wholeness evolves. And so in that case, absolutely, a person, you can choose, an individual can choose to break it down and to go more slowly through that process, the actual healing part of the process, and to appreciate the fine details. All right, good question. I want to close that one down because I want to see questions. Here we go. It's helping to have two computers here. All right. Okay, so one of the questions that came in from Holland, I was saving for today, regarding the healing algorithm. And, we can think of the healing algorithm as one of the keys to energy healing. Although when I was thinking of today's session, I was thinking even simpler than that. But her question is how to understand the algorithm in a really simple way so that it's super accessible for everyone. And I love that. So let's do that. The healing algorithm, as a brief description, is bringing awareness, which is usually more up here on the surface of experience, like concrete thoughts, right? And following a thought deeper, down to its more abstract form, down to its feeling form, down to the individual impulses of intelligence that are behind that thought, and then down to the most abstract level. And experiencing the source of creation. And when there's a problem at the surface, we put the attention with the thought, you could say the thought that is the vehicle for the quieting down of the mind into the source of creation, is this experience of the discomfort. So when we first have a discomfort or a problem, and that can be a physical discomfort, or it can be some life situation, relationship problem, or financial, or whatever, we can look at it from a more superficial perspective. We can look at it from a finer perspective. One of the keys to looking at the problem from a finer perspective, which we talked about yesterday, and I'm just so grateful to have had the opportunity to cover this, was that there's this old pattern in human awareness that when there's a problem on the surface, to associate ego with the problem, to associate individuality and who we are as individuals with the problem. Oh, well, that's my problem and I deserved it because I'm a bad person, or I'm not good enough, I failed somehow, I messed up, whatever. And that kind of like it turns back onto oneself, and this sense of self gets sort of gripped into the problem itself. And when that happens, a little vicious cycle or a loop is created that tends to be self-feeding. And this is the mechanic by which chronic disease, illnesses or long-term ongoing problems are locked into the physiology. They don't lock in. If the individuality, if the sense of self doesn't get sort of gripped into that, the discordant feelings and the unhealthy patterning of the threads of consciousness, if the sense of self doesn't, then the problem tends to resolve rather quickly. But it's when we start, the sense of self gets in there, it's because I'm a bad person, or sometimes it's because I experienced these traumas in my past, right? Because of somebody who was mean to me or something. So we did a healing yesterday for that. And it's truly my hope that that will be one that goes up on note to my team who are busy texting people over there. But yeah, it's something that goes up. That's something that goes up for everybody on YouTube as a full public presentation, because it's so important and it's so old and it's been with us for so long. So I'm just feeling into the group here and feeling into that sense of self and looking at the mechanism under the microscope in more detail. Why is it and how is it that when a problem crops up, that there's this very natural tendency for the individual to get sort of gripped in their sense of self, gets gripped into it. And I'd say the answer to that is very simple, that the problem crops up in the first place. The problem cropping up is when the hero gets cast out onto the streets, and then the ego getting caught up in it is the expression. It's a purification expression that is required to help the individual step back from individual ego expression and see exactly what is the part of me that's inclined to get caught up in that, and how can I come into more my essential nature, know myself. This is what ego is self-knowing. Know myself to be larger than that, bigger than that, more powerful, more flexible, more strong than that. So the catching of the ego means that there's some stripping away of non-essential self. And we don't want to say that the ego is non-essential. The ego is essential. If there's a key to energy healing here, anything you take away, it's that your ego is essential. It's important. And without it, we can't navigate this world effectively by any means. And we can't find our way back to wholeness without it. But so what is it? I'm looking, there are something energetically, it looks like little talons or like outcroppings on the ego that are like, that allow it to kind of connect on to these experiences and discord, that allow it to kind of connect on to discord. Oh, that's very interesting. And the problem is that the connection is there specifically to support your ability to go beyond the discord. But the pattern over the course of time is that the connecting on the talons, the little hooks, I'm picturing the way certain types of neurochemicals hook into cells, right? Because the knot of karma is a little bit like a cell, right? On the inside, it has its internal components, which are give it its life force and its ability to bring experiences about. And then it's got the cell wall, and the ego has this way of like sort of hooking into nodes on the cell. We want to call them nodes on the cell wall, those little discordant points particular types of discordant feelings that resonate more with some people's egos than others. So it's like those particular imbalances and have those particular types of discordant feelings that will grip you, because there's some types that don't grip people, and everybody's different. We're all a little bit different. So what happens is when the karma comes back, or when the particular individual specific challenge is being faced, it customizes itself to accommodate that particular aspect, some particular aspect of the sense of self that is inhibiting complete awareness and complete experience of oneself at the cosmic level, cosmic self, wholeness or totality. I have to drink a lot more water in this part of the country. Thank you for understanding. This actually ties into another question that came up, which I wanted to touch on. I'm not seeing it in that email, but I just read it a few moments ago. And the lady said that she was meditating before the webinar in the tub. And she yesterday asked the question about the presence of the Mother of Creation, Mother Divine. And my point to her was that as long as we think, oh, Mother Divine is out there somewhere and I as the individual am here somewhere, it means that there's this potential for more integration to occur, because essentially there is one story only happening. And that's what the picture was about, was shows that one story in a nutshell, but this one story of wholeness evolving through us. So that closeness, that feeling of closeness to Mother Divine, and that ability for the heart energy center to bring forward that level of cosmic love and cosmic wisdom is directly associated with the egos, with the evolution of the ego. The evolution of the ego to expand to this, it has to be stable, to expand to the collective level of creation, to the one wholeness level of creation. I'm not saying that I'm doing it perfectly either. I mean, I have my, I'm living in a plastic apartment. There's a part of me that's like, where's nature? I want nature. Anyway, but that's okay. We're finding the nature, finding it inside, structuring it through consciousness. Then we get to enjoy it. There are mountains around here. This is happening as a healing. It's a shift that's taking place in the gap right there. Is this direct support for the sense of self for everyone? It's definitely one of the keys of energy healing, is recognizing. All we have to do is recognize it. Once you step back enough, your sense of self, who you are, is able to do this step back thing. It's kind of like a move of the ego, essentially, or the move of the self, is that we're in a difficult situation and we step back from the difficult situation. So we're looking at it more from a zoomed out perspective. But now we're turning that around and doing it on the ego, on the sense of self itself. So the sense of self, which has the ability to step back and get the zoomed out perspective, is zooming out on its own nature, on its own self. How far can it zoom out? Can it zoom out to infinity? So much bliss. When it zooms out, the bliss comes. So when the ego is a little bit gripped, remember I was saying like a cell, and it kind of gets stuck, gets a little bit caught up in those discordant feelings. That's not bliss. But then when it is able to untwist itself from that and zoom out and look at that seed of karma from the zoomed out perspective. And in this case, the seed of karma is actually a huge collective seed of karma that we've carried for multiple generations and centuries of lifetimes. And the karma is the tendency or the nature of the sense of self to get gripped or caught in the pain of the human experience, of human experiences. So this is healing for the whole collective, and bless you all for being the ones. You are the ones, whether you're with me here live right now, or you're watching this on YouTube, heaven knows how many years in the future or whatever. You are the ones. We are the ones who are doing this together, going into the gap, this is all was all evolving from that question about the healing algorithm. But how the organ, we could say the sense of self is the organ, or the ego is the organ that allows us to zoom back and get a perspective on things, how it's able to turn onto its own nature and zoom out and get a perspective on itself, and how the stripping away of all non-essential aspects of its own nature, which is a purification process. And that is absolutely another one of the keys of energy healing, is purification. That purification process becomes set in a context of understanding that is so rich that instead of it being associated, purification being associated with discomfort and discord and unpleasantness, the purification process can be navigated comfortably, gracefully, in a dignified manner. We like the dignity part of it. I think the dignity is a really important part. And we all have to go through changes. But if we can go through those changes in a way that not only as individuals, but also everyone else involved also can experience, can retain some dignity. This is the dignity. The dignity reflects back to ego, right? Because it's that loss of dignity that's sort of like hurts the individual ego, right? But the secret, part of the secret is non-attachment, not minding too much. If something has to go, so it goes. Even if the dignity has to go, so it goes. I was saying to my beautiful daughter-in-law, when I was at her place, I felt as if my physical body was sort of like public property, right? Because when you're a new mother, you just, your body belongs, it belongs to others in a way. And that even though we're used to, with dignity, we're used to being clothed and covering up. At that time, it's a privilege and an honor to not be clothed. It's essential. It's an essential part of the process. So even those experiences can be processed. The experience of purification can be processed in such a way that one's dignity is retained, even if the superficial changes on the surface are outside of the traditional comfort zone. There's always a way to put it in perspective. There's always a way to zoom out and to understand it in the context of wholeness so that it fits. And that is happening. And what I'm seeing happening in the collective is that this zooming out ability is going back through time to all these, and we did this yesterday too. We were kind of going back in time to all those points of trauma and suffering and difficulty that left little marks or scars. They left sanskaras. That's the Sanskrit word for it, on the soul, little impressions and memory patterns on the soul. And each one we're zooming out enough to provide the perspective required to put it, to reconnect with wholeness, to reconnect with the bigger picture, the whole story, and see how appropriate, where is the appropriateness? Where is that spark of divinity? Where is that point of fullness that allows your potential to be expressed even in that moment, even in those difficult moments? It's a kind of a washing. We went into the purification. The purification is moving through the fabric, the fine fabric of the soul at this level that's deeper than space and time. So it's moving through this very, very delicate level of the soul where all those little threads that comprise the seeds of karma, right? Because karma is the return on past actions. But the return is the return is so beautiful and it's so appropriate and lovely when the individual pieces that were activating the pain are removed. So it's not that we don't pay the old debts. We do pay the old debts, but we pay them in a context that allows a person to maintain their dignity and to do it in a way that's comfortable and gracious and easy, graceful, gracious, easy, comfortable, appropriate. We can do it. We can do it. We can. I'm feeling it's like the big self, your big self right now in this moment, and us and our big collective, because we're supporting and holding each other up. And so we're like a big collective that's looking to the energy field of the whole larger human collective and acting like a sort of embrace of compassion and mercy and sweetness. This is the part that really drives. It's like it gives the energy that drives the healing forward into this larger expression, this cosmic expression, going to the cosmic body. So not just human, but also out into that larger cosmic field of creation. It makes so much sense to me because the planets are they create just the right kinds of pressures from the exterior that allow particular karmas to come through. So this is a healing not just for our bodies, our human physical bodies, but it's also a healing for those larger cosmic bodies, for the larger, our solar system and its relationship to the larger galactic sphere around it. That's why that big wave from the heart was coming through, that wave of Mother Divine energy. And it takes that level, it takes like a really cosmic level of love to be able to take the healing that was like it's a little fractal, right? It was like our little shape of that little guy over there, and then extend it. The love goes into the pattern when the pattern is just right, and it blossoms it open so that it goes to the cosmic field. Oof. So beautiful, so perfect. Amazing, amazing, amazing. I think I'm feeling that the resolution part of the spiral now. So I think we'll let that one stand for now as it is. And I hope I answered that sufficiently. I've really done a lot of webinars and a lot of videos and entries on my knowledge base about the healing algorithm. So if you want deeper information about that, please feel free. One lady is saying, oh, let's see. Oh, one lady's saying regarding memory loss, balance issues, exhaustion, overwhelm, some losses. She lost her separation from her partner and then her father, diagnosed with dementia is so sad. So a lot of losses, and then feeling no longer grounded, no longer well grounded, because this memory loss and balance issues and exhaustion over, especially, if you're taking care of people and you're taking care of difficult situations, I read this imbalance as a imbalance in the space and air elements of the physiology. Hearing is space, and also balance. Oh, let's see. She didn't say hearing issue. She said balance issue, but then the balance is also inner ear. And memory loss also is the hippocampus, which is just right in there, just on the other side of the ear, basically, on the other side of the skull from the ear, right up in here. Hippocampus memory. So for memory, there's a knitting. This is for all of us, because my memory isn't perfect either. Like I didn't remember the name of the artist who made that artwork. It was an unusual name, fair enough, but but anyway, yeah, the memory area is here in the hippocampus area. It's the superior temporal cortex of the brain. So we're just putting some attention right in there. And the space of the ears is just like right below it. And when the space gets imbalanced, it can affect that area in the brain just above it. And then feeling the activation of that compassion element from the heart moving up into that part of the head. I'm seeing the mechanics here. So much life force and energy is being used to deal with emotional issues that the intellectual side of the memory process has been compromised. It's like a certain amount of life force had been drawn more into the center of the brain, and not enough was more out, because the hippocampus is more part of the cortex, right? But the memory, I mean, excuse me, the emotional processing is more inner, like the limbic system, more on the inside of the brain. So all the life force was going in there, dealing like emergency style coping with trauma. And I'm also seeing an activation in the solar plexus area that's sort of an awakening of a lot of creative energy is moving up through the body. It moves from the area around the navel, then up through into the solar plexus where it gains power and momentum. And then it comes up through the heart center. And at the heart center, the energy takes on this lovely compassion, mercy, sweetness, a recognition, unconditional appreciation and recognition for oneself. And that, as it's moving up into this area, is helping to strip away those aspects of those little pieces. I remember I was saying the ego, it looked like it had talons or little threads that came out from it. And those talons and threads have gotten woven in to the energy structures or the experiences that are being processed in the limbic system. And so as those talons are being dissolved back out again to give you the ability to zoom out and to see this experience from more of a zoomed out perspective as a purification experience, to strip away aspects of your reality that were no longer serving your evolution. Clearing attachments in the Ajna chakra and the upper chakras. Attachments to things being the same. They change. The nice, big, healthy, like robust flow of energy coming up from the heart center, coming up into the head, moving up first into the limbic system, and then spreading out into the cortices of the brain. And what being brings, what you bring, what's brought through this process of evolution of wholeness is pure awareness, pure consciousness, pure perception. It's just that purest, most complete, most profound expression of your potential moving into the hippocampus area. And it's moving up from this inside like a flower blooming. It's coming up like that. And just allowing that flow of energies inside the body to go up and to nourish the head, the whole head area, the whole head. Also, balance is related to, if we make a triangle from the hippocampus here, there's a piece in the back, which is related to, I have to look that up. Oh, my memory. I think it's the pons, but it's this area back here where the neural connections associated with balance is here in the brain. But there's also this other part in the back that's associated with like muscular movement. And it's the relationship between the balance area in the ear and this area of muscular movement. I'm just looking through our group, that area, just to support and strengthen and open any channels to clear away. Again, attachments are in there. So to clear away all the attachments and associations with who we think we are as an individual, clearing away right there, particularly on the left side. The right side was pretty good, pretty strong, but the left side, which controls the right side of the body, beautiful. Clearing that, feeling a nice wave of clarity of being moving up through the brainstem and right up around, curling up around the brain like that, like a wash. It's a wash of light medicine. More from the heart also coming up. Light medicine is, and I am seeing, it looks like a nice sort of stable form of the astral body, right up here in the head area now, very symmetrical, very integrated, like a matrix, like a multidimensional matrix right around the head, flower of life matrix around the head to stabilize all the parts and to bring everything into balance and wholeness. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful thing to witness. Keeping going because our time. Thank you for the question. This beautiful woman is very, very sensitive, intuitive healer, is asking how to protect herself from energetically experiencing the emotions or pain of other people. And, here I'm just drawing on my own experience as well. My experience is that, like, her example is almost identical to similar examples that I've had, particularly her example of being connected to her father. He, before the days of the internet or even cell phones, her father on the East Coast was rushed to the hospital. And at the same time, she was on the West Coast and she went to the emergency room because she thought she was having a heart attack. Turns out she checked out completely fine, but he had to receive a pacemaker because he was, and so she was experiencing his same experience. My experience is that I would like to give you a different answer than the one I'm going to give you. That's all I can say because I love you. And I wish I could say, oh, you can just don't have to experience any of that. But that's not my experience. My experience is that I feel stuff. I definitely feel everything that people are feeling. Oh, yeah, see, other people are raising their hands too. There are other people that are also feeling, yeah, the hands are going up over here. Yeah, because that it's not so much a matter of not feeling what other people are feeling, but very, very quickly recognizing that it's not your stuff. Being able to, that discrimination, it's like increasing discrimination. It's also this work that we did today for ego that helps you zoom out. If the discomfort's there and you zoom out, then when you zoom out, you're like, oh, wait a minute, that's not my stuff. But in the case with the father, and I was very, very close to my dear, beautiful, sweet, amazing father with whom I feel I had a perfect daughter-father relationship. It was so, God bless that man. Some transgenerational karma as well. So the feeling is, you didn't physically, God bless, that your physical body wasn't actually having a heart attack, but that you were using your own spiritual prowess and your own spiritual strength, the strength of your being, to help your father transition through that experience so that it didn't hit him harder. Because, he came out of it with a pacemaker, but he could have come out of it dead. Like, he could have not come out of it had it not been for the level of support that you added in. So the question is, it wasn't fun for you to go to the hospital and think you were having a heart attack, but was it worth keeping him alive that much longer? And I would say, I'm sure if you look back, you would probably say yes, that you would have done that for him, that you would do that for him. So the point here is that when that ability to zoom out, which is what that big healing one of the big healings in today's session was about, that ability to zoom out is more stabilized in the system. Isn't it interesting? I'm sorry, side tangent, but so important. Okay, so the evolution of one is to create the diversity and then enter into the diversity. But this healing that we did for the ego was to be able to, like the individuality, go to the wholeness. It was like the individuality going to the wholeness, the one being, the ego in its parts, that we're able to step out and experience the wholeness of ego. So even though totality is entering into the individuality is also coming back to the wholeness at the same time. Both are happening, which is why the artist who represents it as a circle was so flame on, right? That's why that image is so compelling and beautiful. Yeah, about that side tangent. The point is that we don't stop feeling what people feel, but the capacity to be grounded in totality, which I'm sure you are more now than you were back then. Even that experience probably helped you do that, right? But to be grounded and to be stable in that experience of one's totality, one's cosmic nature, and then witness whatever the experience is, the pain that somebody's experiencing. But not be gripped by it, not the individuality be gripped by it. A little more stability. And I'm seeing that stability going for all of us in the group, going into that solar plexus area. Now at the core, that our cores are where our strength is. So this stabilization of the witnessing capacity, oh, it's like moving, it's integrating down in the body all the way down into the gut area. Oh yeah, that's quite perfect actually. Good for digestion, among other things, but also because it's the gut area where our microbiome is where we experience the universe from multiple points of perspective simultaneously. So this is, you can think of your gut microbiome area as kind of like your individual little universe, because there's like trillions, right? Trillions of points of perspective in the gut on every single moment of experience of this universe. What is it? 370 trillion, I think. Yeah. So that stabilization right there in the gut area, that's where the stabilization of the zoomed out perspective, all the points of perspective and all the zoom out at the same time. That's what we were talking about earlier, right? That the wholeness is trying to get into each point and each point is trying to get into wholeness at the same time. That premise, that process, which, takes a lot of English words to describe, but that's happening right there in the gap right now. And it's happening through the body, but particularly in the Basti Mahamarma. And you can look up Mahamarmas on my knowledge base if you want to read more about them. Okay. Here's someone making a comment about that image that I put up. The issue is that the sculpture and the seismograph are pointing in different directions. Yes, I noticed that. Yes, right. The image underneath is facing one way and the image up top is facing the other way. So their correlation really is correct if one of the images is reversed in direction. Yes. Okay, beautiful. Thank you. Okay, here's a really super intelligent, amazing question. Oh, there's just a quickie. Are you a grandma, dear Dorothy? I am late, question mark? Yes, I became a grandma less than a week ago. I have like a 5-day-old baby girl right now. My heart is melting. Okay. Do we have a special discordant feeling receptors depending upon the karmic lessons we need to learn? Yes, yes. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. You are so wise. You are so amazing. I love your questions. Yeah, I would say the karmic lesson itself will cause specific types of receptors to activate, but also there's two things, because the receptors are being controlled both from the inside of the karmic seed and also from the outside. So the receptors, there'll be certain ones that will attract your awareness into that space where that karmic knot is. And those are more related to the nature of one's own individual ego one's own individual sense of self, whatever it is that one individually needs to, it's like your desire, your heart's desire, right? And we talked about that so much in the last webinar set, that the heart's desire leads us into those situations and circumstances that are personally evolutionary. So that part of self will lead you into that place where that karmic knot is that needs to be addressed. But then once we get up to the karmic knot, then there are always nuances that are specifically, they're like, I would say they're signals from one's own divine nature to help direct awareness into the exact area that it needs to be directed in order to resolve that particular problem. Because the karma will always be related to, as I mentioned before, there's like a past action element there that this returns from the past. And so it's not a direct one-on-one correlation, because it's a little bit like those of you who are familiar with the principles of purification during meditation, right? That it's the thoughts that can arise during that purification process they're not exactly related to the exact stress that's being released, but there are aspects of them that are. There are things about the quality or the energy behind it, behind the thought, that are related. And of course, discordant feelings are not so much like thoughts, they're feelings. So they definitely embody various values of creative intelligence, nuanced values, creative intelligence. It's a great question. I think there's a lot more that we could unpack in that. But we also have several more questions too. I'm almost thinking this could be something for like a whole webinar or so. There's so much. I love the way you're in my minds, like they go deep together. It's so cool. I really thank you. Thank you. Such a great question. That is it, for example, one question comes up in my mind is it appropriate for a karmic knot to have these receptors? Like maybe it would be possible to restructure things from the level of consciousness so that the karmic knots, they don't have those receptors specifically for the ego, because when the ego gets caught up in there, that's what keeps things, chronic conditions rolling. And like if we are transmuting ourselves through energy healing, transforming ourselves so that we don't have chronic conditions, then is there a way to eliminate those receptocytes on the walls, the outer walls of the karmic knot? And would that be useful? Because if they're there naturally and they've always been there. So maybe there's a reason for them. And my thought is always nature has to make that decision. Nature has to make that choice. I'm just going to take a little dive, just a little deep dive and see. In this dive, so what did I do? I was just diving into the source of creation, just asking being what it is. And being came back with the receptocytes are valuable because this hero's journey, this pattern that we go through, that I go through, is one of stripping back to the essential self. And it supports the receptocytes, and the fact that they attract the ego have a useful purpose. It's like the most efficient way. This is being, it was like speaking. This is the most efficient way that I found in the human system to help strip away those excess aspects of coverings or layers on the essential self. My question back to being is, but it's so painful sometimes. And isn't there, could there possibly, from our humble little perspective, be a more useful way to do that? Is there a way? Is there, like zooming out the ego upon itself so that it's training, the being is saying, it does train, it trains you over time to always zoom out, something's not right, you zoom out, like as a gut reaction. Oh, I see, it's a habit. Okay, good, we got something here. Yes, that in the ancestry and in the history, this was like on autopilot, sort of. It was like this habit. Oh, I'm experiencing pain. Oh, well, I must be a bad person. Right? It was like was rolling in like that. And that habit is being replaced with, oh, I'm experiencing some pain. I must zoom out. Simple, simple. We've done that before from other angles, as I recall. But I'm asking the divine, then why can't we just get that? Because we've done that before. Why can't we make it so that it's like more dominating in human experience than the other experience, which seems to be dominating instead? Right? Like there's some of us, right? And we've been working on it and we tend to remember to zoom out, but most people don't zoom out. So why is it that like most people don't zoom out? Why is it the other one dominates if the other one is like more painful and it gives rise to unpleasant experiences and so forth? And it even, I would say, inhibits the evolutionary process, right? Because if you zoom out right away, you start popping through the whole healing process. But if you're gripped, if the ego is gripped into that pain experience, then it inhibits and it slows it down. Being is saying how slowed down it is, how deeply I enter. How slowed down it is, how deeply I enter. So my question is there another way that we could slow things down just a little bit without the pain element, without the chronic pain? How could we slow things down for you? How can we as humans accommodate our own divine nature that wants to go deeply, deeply and explore the luscious, fine inner workings of the mechanics of creation in full detail in a way that doesn't involve the pain and the loss of dignity and all those rougher experiences? So the first answer back is knowing it. Knowing it. The zooming out, oh, here's interesting. The zooming out process integrates with humility. Oh, so good. Okay, so we do that, right? So we built up, we took us a while to build up to that point. Okay, but so now that's happening, that integration of the humility and the zooming out process. Marriage, marriage, a marriage, marriage. The humility, it goes along with this sort of like deep reverence, right? And reverence, according to Vedic science, is a key component in the unity experience. Unity is unity consciousness, or unity union with the divine is carried on the vehicle of reverence, which of course is that humility along with the zooming out, like intentionally I appreciate. So this reference is folding. It's folding in through the layers of the self. And I see it. I understand why. The reverence, of course, will create a condition in the system where one is not doing anything that might hurt oneself, including hurting one's ego, right? So important, because there's been I want to say fad, but I'm not going to, I think that's a little bit too, that's not reverent enough. The word fad is not reverent enough, but there's been a fashion. There's been a fashion lately in the awakening communities of that the ego is kind of like the enemy, and it's not the enemy, that it's actually with reverence that the ego transforms to its highest potential as the instrument for safest energy healing, for its role in the unification process. Its role in the unification process for everyone, for every point in creation, for every one of those trillions of hundreds of thousands of trillions of gut bacteria, for every particle of creation. It's all being offered back into the, remember the tsunami thing? It goes to a point, right? So it goes all the way back to unmanifest wholeness at the point. That's what our healing is doing. My heart is melting. I love the lady who asked that question. She always asks these questions that just get me. I'm so grateful. Okay, we got more questions. So this dear friend is asking kind of a personal question, but hopes that we can launch open. Another person whose questions just really get me and we always go like such amazing places. So he said he recently got very bored by world events. I know, right? It's such a drama sometimes. Anyway, and just want to just ship. He just wants to like just get off of that. Um, Experiencing very dark thoughts. There is some witnessing, so I don't necessarily feel gripped by the dark thoughts, but they do produce the chemical soup that makes life appear very flat and gray and pointless. And how can I best support myself to produce a more enjoyable, enlivening soup? And he called me grandma. Oh, thanks. Uh, I'm gonna start because it's such a personal question. I'm actually gonna start answering from a sort of personal perspective, like I did with the other lady too, who is having similar experiences that, all the heaviness of the world experiences that are going down are there for those individuals who need that level of discomfort in order to do their evolution. And, we've talked quite a lot about that today, about how sometimes the divine needs to slow things down. And the more difficult situations can do that for people. They can unfold the mechanics with a lot of detail. We certainly, your intention or your feeling that you want to jump ship is coming from a place inside of you that knows that you don't need to drag yourself through that much mud to learn that lesson, that experience. I mean, I realize that one of the reasons that you've been looking into, and we all have been, I mean, the latest, we've got the fires in California, we've got poor Australia. I just feel sorry. I've seeing videos coming out of Australia that just are just, but the thing is, we have a choice of to what degree we want to engage with all that mess. And the love that we experience, the compassion and the sweetness, absolutely has a healing effect for the people who are more directly involved and engaged in those difficult situations. So looking at them and waking up the heart energies is useful and it's good and it's important. And we could say maybe part of our service to humanity as expressions of totality. But if it comes to the point that the heart doesn't feel that it's draining, it means you just need to go reboot your batteries. So experiencing dark thoughts, yeah, it's the moment that the thoughts get dark and you start to feel like this is just so dragging me down that it's time to just kind of extract yourself some from it. When that happens, these waves of compassion and mercy and forgiveness and love that you've been, all this life force that you've been sort of pouring into these difficult situations, then they can turn around and start to pour into you. So part of it is to make the shift. What I'm seeing from the situation is that you've been oriented more out toward all this stuff for a while. And that once you realize, oh, I have to pull away, you pull away, but you haven't quite, the flexibility hasn't quite fully set in that you turn it around and you give it back to yourself. Because I think what you've done is you strengthened your healing capacity by going into these very intense and profound experiences. And by doing so, you now have greater capability of self-healing. But it hasn't fully turned 180 degrees yet. And so what needs to happen is that turn to be able to, and you're right, this is a point that can kind of go, that can be something that would be a launching point for our collective, because ultimately what we want, like that kind of moment in today's session when the wholeness is reaching out to the individual, but the individual is also reaching back to wholeness, that it can be both at the same time. And so it's just, you're right on the verge of it. You're right on the cusp that you've been so like, I need to heal the world. I need to heal the world, like that. And then now it's like, oh, I need to help. It's too much. And then healing oneself and going right in just as that turn is happening. And I so appreciate, it's such a privilege. It's such an honor. Like, I feel so reverent about this also, just that also we've been in this state of reverence, but that turn, it's like, well begun is half done, right? The moment of birth tells the whole story of the life. That the turn is happening in a way that is not 100% taking you fully out of your sense of responsibility and love and compassion for our world, but it's happening kind of like both at the same time. It's creating a kind of a deep flexibility in you so that you are nourished while you also nourish the world, that you are nourishing your collective self while you are nourishing the world. The ability to zoom out the ego will let you look at those super, super dark areas, those ones that just stomach turning, the rough ones, and still be able to hold steady your sense of self. I mean, when I look at the really difficult, and for me, the hardest ones are, when the innocent people end up hurt. Those are the hardest for me. So, there are always reasons that if we zoom out enough, you'll see the reason why the innocent person has to be subjected. Because sometimes when a person's very innocent, they're also very strong. So they're little, but they're strong. It's very, very delicate turning. The turn toward the healing of the self is a turn both inwardly and outwardly at the same time. It's a kind of an inner and outer blossoming going at the same time, so that you are nurtured and you are nourished by that process. You are strengthened and wholeness is integrated for you as your heart expands out towards all the suffering of the world, and at the same time is so big and so full that it nourishes you also. There's some letting go of attachments too. Letting go of attachments to the drama element of it, and which you've already done, basically. I can see that. That whole idea of I just want to jump ship is like, I'm done. I am so done with the drama. Like, come on, people, wake up. Something like that, we wish. So what is the insight required to see through when we act from control, trying to change something, or use the algorithm in a way that is helping to reestablish natural balance and alignment with the divine? Or was the question already answered? Right. So that's just a little follow-up to the question on the algorithm. And her point there was that, maybe it's wrong to try to control things. I think that's basically, and how do you use the algorithm without trying to control things? Without individual ego coming in to control and trying to exert personal control. And the answer is that is built into the nature of the algorithm, because the nature of the algorithm is to always go into wholeness, is to bring in that reverence, that element of humility and reverence, being so lively and present in the gap that the perspective of totality is recognized as optimal, the optimal setup. Now, remember, we really went in, I know we're just a minute over time, but I want to just break this down slightly. And that is that Um, we went into this in detail today when we were looking at this way that the karmic knot draws in the ego aspects of individual ego, and that whole question and answer series, that cycle that we went through. Because sometimes the way nature has set things up, the way, God set things up, was efficient at that time. It is efficient for a purpose at a particular way at a particular time. But when we evolve to another level, then we send that message back into the source of creation and like, hey, you know what? We're evolved enough now. You don't have to slap us in order to get our attention. You've already got our attention. We're here, you've got our attention. Now we're here, we're sitting in humility and reverence, ready to learn. You don't need to not slap me to make me learn this lesson. And then nature goes, oh, look at that. And then all the laws of this is a huge thing that we did today. All the laws of nature shift and turn. They turn around and they recalibrate themselves to accommodate that higher level of inner awakeness. Thank you for asking the question again. I really appreciate it. All right, beautiful ones. Oh, self-sabotage. Oh, good questions. Lots of amazing, awesome. Don't watch TV, right? I love you guys. Okay, so yes, thank you for all of your comments and questions, and I adore you very much. And now that I'm a little more settled here in Arizona, it's my intention to bring out even more knowledge and information. I feel that the new environment may be able to support me to bring out some new stuff. So I'm excited to do that for everybody. And I look forward to seeing you again soon. Thank you. Thank you for all the raised hands, and thank you for being with me. And I'll look forward to our next webinar coming up at the end of September, I think. Yeah. Thank you. Bye-bye. Have a beautiful weekend.